Shalom all, and welcome to today's Genesis to Revelations study, chapters 33 to 31. Very short one, maybe 5 or so minutes, because there's not much for salvation issues on it. The main salvation issue point is Jacob's wife Leah stealing her father Laban's God's images when he went away with them. Okay, let me just get to reading into what I've got here. Genesis, verse 5. So these are the verses I want to draw your attention to in my comments. 31:5. And said unto them, I see your father's countenance. This is Jacob talking to his wives, his Laban's daughters. I see that your father's countenance, that it is not towards me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And you know that with all my power I have served your father. And your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God suffered him not to hurt me. So my comment, why did God treat Jacob this way? And because of Abraham, the promise made to Abraham. Would God have treated Jacob this way if he was an unrighteous person, simply because of Abraham? And I'll refer you to verse 13. Next, did that work for sinning Solomon, who had David as his father? So in other words, just because God made a promise to your father doesn't mean it will work or transfer to the son. Because David was a righteous man, a man after God's own heart, and he had a son, Solomon, who started off right and wanted to lead God's people. But yet when he went against God, transgressed, God left him, took away the kingdom from him. So the reason why God was the way he was to Jacob wasn't purely because of Abraham. That's a starting point. But we also have to continue in the blessings that our parents may have brought upon us through their good service to God. God is with us because we obey, not because our parents or someone prays for us. We have to do our part as well. A father's righteousness cannot cover a son's sins. Ezekiel chapters 14, verses 14 and 20. God speaking, though these 3 men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, 3 righteous men, God saying, were in it, talking about a boat, they should deliver but their own souls by their righteousness, saith Yahweh God. And Genesis 31:13, I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowedst a vow unto me. And Genesis 28:20. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, if God would be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat, and remnant to put on. So that was a vow that he made. He wasn't asking for a lot of things, just simple things. And he vowed that, and he'll serve God. Today people will only serve God if he gives them mansions and big cars and things. Okay, Genesis 28:21. Then shall Yahweh, or the Lord, be my God, was the end of his vow. So my note, to claim God as your God, you must obey his commandments and live the life he prescribes. Just like Ruth proclaimed in Ruth 1, chapter 16. She said to Naomi, your God will be my God, and so forth. Jacob did not vow to follow God in return for riches, but simply his life, bread and clothing, unlike prosperity sermons today and showing financial theology.
Okay, continuing from 31:17. Then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon camels, and he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting, which he had gotten in Padamaram. And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. So God has told Jacob to leave this place. He's got all his wealth and family together, and he's gone off, stolen away. Laban then realizes and he's going to come after them, because he realizes that his gods, the images, has also been taken. What will happen next is like Abraham and Isaac got their wealth from Abimelech, the children of Jacob has got his from Laban, but also the children of Israel via Moses will get their wealth from the Egyptians when they leave Egypt and spoil the Egyptians, as it says in Exodus chapters 12 verse 36. So some parallels there. Continuing from Genesis chapters 31 verse 29. Laban catches up with them, and this is what he is saying to Jacob. It is in my power of my hand to do you hurt, but the God of your father spoke unto me yesterday night, saying, Take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And it goes on, Laban then ends, Yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? So my comment, even though Laban was related to Jacob's mother by being a brother, he had married into a different god system. He still serves a different god. Abraham and sons married and brought wives into their faith. So here Jacob, he's got 4 wives, and hopefully they'll soon follow his faith. Abraham's sister married a man, Laban, of a pagan faith. So the Jews through lineage are not necessarily by the father, but could also be via the mother, according to the Bible. But although this common tradition is that it only comes via one source, one of the parents. Continue from Genesis chapter 38 verse 31. Laban's accused Jacob, and Jacob is replying, These 20 years have I been with thee. The rams of thy flock have I not eaten. That which was torn of beasts I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was in the day of the drought consumed. Thus I was in the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Verse 41. Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle. And thou hast changed my wages 10 times. And he ends, God hath seen my affliction and the labour of my hands. So you see, diligent hard work, obedience to God's commandments and prayers pay off, not buying blessings with God with financial sowing seeds, as is preached today in many places. Continue from 31 verse 47. And Laban called, so they make a pact, and it says Laban called that place Jejar-Shadatha, but Jacob called it Gilead. Speaking different languages, I presume. They both call it by the same thing, the heap of witnesses, but Laban used the Chaldean language and Jacob the Hebrew language. Continuing from 32 verse 28. And he said, this is God now speaking to Jacob after they departed, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. Verse 33 verse 29. Before we come on to that, then Jacob almost returns back to his original home. Esau hears about it, comes to meet him. Jacob gets afraid and basically offers him some wealth that he's gained. And Esau replies in 33 verse 9. And he said, I have enough, my brother. Keep that thou hast unto thyself. They then depart different directions. Esau goes back to his place, and Jacob moves on to find some land of his own for his wealth and his cattle. So, although Esau had sold his birthright in Genesis 25 verse 31, which entitles him to a double portion of inheritance as a firstborn and the genealogy lineage, he did not lose out on the possessions. He only lost out on the lineage. The lineage now go Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Esau inherited all the Isaac's possessions as Jacob had ran away. So when Isaac died, Esau, being the son, got everything. So it's just God did this just for the lineage change, not for the possession change. Continuing from Genesis 33 verse 18. And Jacob came to Shalem, a city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padanaram, and pitched his tent before the city. And he brought a parcel of a field where he had spread his tent, at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And he erected there an altar and called it Elohe Israel. Okay, we're now going to come on to chapters 34 to 36.
Shalom all, and welcome to today's Bible study of Genesis to Revelations. Today's chapters are chapters 34 to 36, which covers Dinah being raped, and Shechem wanted to marry her, and then Levi and Simeon going and killing them and taking their women and children captives. Jacob returns to Bethel. Rachel dies whilst giving birth to Benjamin, who will later be the one that Joseph sends for. Isaac also dies, and chapter 36 ends with Esau's family record. So, starting at Genesis 34, verse 1. And Dinah did, remember you're supposed to read it yourself, so I'm just going to quickly read the verses before I comment on them. And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her. Verse 4. And Shechem spake unto his father Hamor, saying, Get me this damsel to wife. And then verse 8, and Hamor communed with them, saying, I pray you, give her to me to wife. And Shechem said unto her father and unto her brethren, Let me find grace in your eyes, and what you say unto us, so will we do. Or whatever you ask, we will give. Verse 12, Ask me never so much a dowry, and give, and I will give according as you shall say unto me. But give me the damsel to wife. I highlighted the part of the account to draw its resemblance to Deuteronomy chapters 22 to 28, which says, If a man find a damsel, such as Shechem did with Dinah, that is a virgin, which is not betrothed, and lay hold on her, and lie with her, and they be found, then the man that lay with her shall give unto the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he hath humbled her, he may not put her away all his days. So Shechem and Hamor took action to correct what the rape, we can call it, that was a wrong action. The correction, if that is the right term, was the prescribed measure by God and later told to Israel through Moses. And I'm not sure if later those two sons were cursed for killing these people who were said to have done a righteous thing. But we'll come to that when we come to it. So, carry on from verse 19. And the young man deferred not to do the thing. You know, they wanted the men to get circumcised, and they said, okay, we will do it. Because he had delight in Jacob's daughter, and he was more honourable. This is what I was thinking of. More honourable than all the house of his father. Verse 21. These men are peaceable with us. Therefore let them dwell in the land and trade therein, for the land behold, it is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us for wives, and let us give them our daughters. And verse 23, shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? Only let us consent unto them, and they will dwell with us. So after the rape, and the son wanted to marry Dinah, and he asked his dad to go and arrange the union, the marriage. His father went and talks to Isaac, and this condition is that providing the men size themselves to be similar, then they will do it. So the father of Shechem then goes back and persuades all his village, all his people, and they agree to it, as you know the story. And basically what I just said is they said, let us basically be one big happy family. They marry our children and we marry their children. And as a result, we will both prosper. So I'm using this point to show that when two families come together, or even two individuals come together, they should prosper out of the union. Just like making a big enterprise. And the point I also want to make is that when this enterprise comes to an end through divorce costs a lot of people money. It goes to solicitors, and it also breaks up the enterprise so that each individual now has to go back and start from scratch. And it takes away a bigger inheritance from children and so forth. I hope, that's the point I wanted to make. So try and avoid it. God knew what he's doing when he said that try and keep people together. And by Israel staying together, they became a bigger nation. And even in subsequent generations, when one kingdom, such as England, wanted to become a bigger kingdom, more powerful kingdom, they arranged intermarriages between their princes and princesses. Okay, jumping down to Genesis 34:29. And all their wealth and all their... Oh yes, this is when Levi and Simeon went to kill the men, and then they took all their wealth and all their little ones, and their wives took their captives. So again, as we'll see, when Israel goes to war with other people, numbers become bigger. They take in, let's say, foreigners. So the composition of this family, Levi's Isaac family, grew with non-Hebrews. In the same way, when Israel does the same thing, goes to war later on, their numbers, congregation will grow with non-Hebrews who will become part of the congregation. So by the time we come to the New Testament, we'll see there are a mixture of people born, people not born. That's why God said be one law for everybody, whether homeborn or not. As long as you live in the same congregation under his ways, it'll be one law for everybody. Okay, down to chapter 35, which deals with Jacob returning to Bethel. I'm going to start the account, my comments on verse 2, 35:2. Then Jacob said unto his household and to all that were with him, put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean. Verse 4, and they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears. So not only did one of their daughters take Laban's gods, but everyone else had their little idol gods. So the whole congregation was idol worshippers, let's say, almost similar to when they came out of Egypt in, I think, Exodus chapters 31. And when Moses went up to the mountain, they were all dancing around. So not only was this household made up of foreigners, their religion was pagan, foreign idol worshippers as well. Yet it is this group, congregation, that God has taken to be his, giving them his ways of living. And it looks like we're going back to those days where men today are commonly wearing earrings, even Christian men, and thinking this is fine. Okay, going down to verse 10, 35:10. And God said unto him, thy name is Jacob, thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. So again, God repeats something he said before, and also repeats the promises, covenant he gave to him. So these captives then went on to be incorporated into Jacob's extended family, as I said, including his sons. And we shall see that through these foreign persons, marriages and breeding will take place, thus making the congregation of Jacob more diverse. Already we have Jacob have in foreign wives and sons via them, who make up the 12 sons. We see this in chapters 35, 23 and 26, later called the 12 tribes. Now a breakdown of these 12 sons is Leah, the first daughter, had 6. Rachel, the second daughter who we really wanted, had 2. Bilhah, one of the handmaids, also remember called a wife, had 2. And Zilpah, another maid, also called a wife, had 2. So of the 12 sons, we have 8 coming from the relatives of Isaac, Laban being their father and Rebekah being the mother of Isaac, I think, if I remember rightly. And then the 2 handmaids. So let's say we have an 8-to-4 ratio. However, all the men and other foreigners' servants that they had that made up the bulk of the congregation or the household were non-Hebrew, if we want to call them that. So we may have 8 or 9 Hebrews, Jacob and the 6 and 2 sons, and the other 4 sons for the maids plus the whole congregation were non-Hebrew. Now these foreigners, let's call them Gentiles, because the non-Hebrews call them from other nations Gentiles. So we have more Gentiles making up this household of Israel than the pure blood offspring. They came from various nations, tongues, people, and are comparable to those who will be saved. I.e., for example, in Revelation chapters 2:26, which says, "And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations." And Revelation chapter 7 verse 9, "After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude which no man could number, of all nations, kindreds, and people, and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, and palms in their hands." So we see, as they made up the household and of Jacob and congregation of Israel, they can also make up the congregation in the new heaven and new earth. Chapter down to 35:11. "And God said unto him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply, a nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins." Verse 12. "And the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land." So we may see that the motive to claiming to be a Hebrew of Israel's seed is because maybe people would just want the land. They don't necessarily may want the blessings that comes with that other part of the covenant, because they come with obedience to God's laws. And people may not want to keep the covenant to God's laws, but yet they want to claim land. So just say, well, I'm Hebrew, and that makes me the inheritor of the land. They think they can claim and separate the land without and from keeping God's commandments. 35:29. "And Isaac gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him." We saw Abraham was buried by his sons, Isaac and Ishmael. That was chapters 25 verse 9. Now Isaac buried by his sons Esau and Jacob. Jacob's sons, I've already given the composition of them. So I'm going to jump down to chapters 36 verse 1, which is basically the whole chapter deals with the genealogy of Esau. 36:1 says, "Now these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom. Esau took his wives of the daughters of Canaan," and it goes on to list them. And last, I'm going to just read verse 8 before I do my comment. "Thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom." Now there's a relatively recent school of thought that Esau, and I say relatively, it's not hundreds of years old, it was there before, maybe in the 60s or 80s or before, but that's basically, it's come up again in the 2000s, 2010 or whatever. But this old school of thought, or recently school of thought, is that I say that Esau is the Edomites, and they are the Caucasian races of today, and blacks are the seed of Jacob. Now note, Esau married daughters of Ishmael and Hittites, so that their offspring, their children, would be mixed colour. Now I do not think, based on the colour of the occupiers of the Middle East today, that those who propagate this colour thing, division, are saying Ishmael was also a Caucasian like Esau, because they say, look at the composition of people in their land today, who are obviously not Caucasian. Now King David had Hittites in his army, so I'll read some verses at the bottom later. And they made up a part of the congregation. Israel also, they made up part of the congregation of Israel. And he also married Bathsheba, who was married to Uriah the Hittite. Again, I'll show you the verses below. So my point is there was a lot of intermarrying of the same people between Hebrews and non-Hebrews. The speculation of Esau being Caucasian and Jacob black is unproven despite the flimsy hypothetical arguments that they put forward, some of which I covered in my comment on Genesis chapters 25, when I say Esau came out red. The foundation of which they build the premise is biblically false and irrelevant and unprovable without agreeing to their basic assumptions. So we want you to agree their assumptions, and on that, if you agree on those false assumptions, you then get caught up in all the other arguments and scriptures that they may try and use to support their argument. Now, to me, this division, according to colour, is a ploy of Satan to cause division and fighting between each races and nations. God wants to unite, Satan wants to divide and destroy. In brief, God created all and wants all the human race, all people, to receive salvation. His division is based on those who obey his commandments and laws, etc., and those who does not. So here's a few scriptures to show how the Hittites were mixed in with Israel. Genesis 36:2. I'll start with Esau, who he married. Esau took his wives of the daughters of Canaan, Ada, the daughter of Elam the Hittite, and Aholibamah, the daughter of Anna, the daughter of Zibeon the Hivite. Then we come on to 1 Samuel 26:6. Then answered David and said to Ahimelech the Hittite, and to Abishai the son of Zeruiah, brother of Joab, saying, Who will go down with me to Saul, to camp? And Abishai said, I will go down with thee. That's to show that he had Hittites in his army in the congregation. The next one, 2 Samuel 11:3, which says, And David sent and inquired after the woman, talking about Bathsheba. And one said, Is not this Bathsheba the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? So a lot of intermarrying and different mixture of colours of people. So we cannot use colour as a division. Shalom. Hope to see you tomorrow.